"Mama, I decided to move back in and my wife came with me." Those were the exact words that came out of my son Andre's mouth when I opened the door on that Thursday afternoon in Memphis. He didn't ask if he could move in. He didn't call ahead to warn me or give me time to prepare or even think about whether this was something I wanted. He just showed up at my front door with 2 large suitcases, a backpack slung over his shoulder, and that familiar smile he'd always used since childhood whenever he needed something from me, that smile that said he already knew I wouldn't say no. Simone was standing right behind him on my porch, wearing dark sunglasses, even though the Tennessee sun was already setting behind the oak trees that lined my quiet street. She was looking at my house with an expression I couldn't quite read, inspecting every corner of the front garden, every detail of the exterior, as if she were calculating something, measuring something, evaluating whether my home met some standard she had in her mind. I didn't say anything in that moment. The words I should have said, the boundary I should have set, the simple no that would have changed everything, they all stuck in my throat the way they'd been sticking there for 67 years. I just took a step back and let them walk into my house, into my sanctuary, into the space I'd worked so hard to create for myself. But something deep inside me, something that had been sleeping quietly for years, started to stir with an uneasiness I couldn't ignore, a warning signal my body was sending that my mind wasn't ready to acknowledge yet. My name is Pamela Griffin. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Memphis, Tennessee in a small house I bought with my late husband Robert's life insurance money and the savings I'd carefully tucked away over 32 years of working part-time at a fabric store downtown. For 67 years I've given everything I had to this family, every ounce of energy, every dollar I could spare, every moment of my time. 67 years of putting others first, of cooking and cleaning and caring and saving every single penny so my children could have opportunities I never had growing up. My husband Robert passed away 6 years ago. When he left this world, I thought my own life had died right alongside him in that hospital room. For months after the funeral, I didn't know who I was without being someone's wife, without being the mother everyone relied on for everything, without having someone to take care of every waking moment. I walked through my days like a ghost, going through motions, without really living, existing but not thriving. But slowly, very slowly, with the help of my friend Joyce, who refused to let me disappear into grief, I started to rebuild myself from the ground up. I learned how to truly use my cell phone for the first time, not just to receive calls from people who needed something, but to actually engage with the world. Now I have WhatsApp where I message my friends, Facebook where I share recipes and photos, even an Instagram account where I post pictures when Joyce and I go out to lunch, or visit the botanical gardens, or take day trips to nearby towns. I go to the hair salon on Union Avenue every 2 weeks without fail. I get my nails done in colors that make me smile when I look down at my hands. I color my hair a rich chestnut brown that makes me feel alive and vibrant instead of invisible. Every morning at 6:30, I meet Joyce and 3 other women at Shelby Farms Park, and we walk together for an hour, talking and laughing and sharing our lives. We're a group of women who, like me, decided that life doesn't end when you hit 60 or 65 or 70, that there's still joy to be found, still adventures to have, still reasons to wake up excited about the day ahead. Last year, I took an online baking course and learned to make French pastries I'd only ever seen in bakery windows. I made new friends through that class, women from all over the country who shared my love of creating something beautiful with their own hands. I started living for myself, not just for everyone else, and it felt revolutionary. This house is mine. I chose it, I bought it, I own it. When Robert died and the life insurance check came, I could have given that money to Andre, who was going through financial troubles at the time. I could have split it with my 2 sons the way everyone expected me to. But for the first time in my life, I made a selfish decision. I kept that money and I bought this house with it, combined with the savings I'd accumulated from 3 decades of careful budgeting and working at the fabric store. I chose every single brick, every window frame, every fixture in the bathroom, every plant in the front garden where I grow azaleas and black-eyed Susans and crepe myrtles that bloom brilliant pink every summer. It's small, just 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with big windows that let in the morning, light a kitchen with white cabinets, I painted myself, and a backyard patio where I keep my potted flowers that I tend to every single morning. before the heat of the day sets in. But it's mine. No one gifted it to me. No one did me a favor by handing it over. No one can take it away from me because I earned it. I paid for every square foot with my own money. I decorated it according to my own taste. I decided on every single thing inside it, from the cream-colored sofa with floral cushions in the living room, to the photographs on the walls, to the dishes in my kitchen cabinets. For these 6 years, since Robert died, I had lived here alone and in peace. Real peace. The kind I'd never experienced in all my years of marriage and motherhood, when there was always someone needing something, always another crisis to solve, always another person's needs coming before my own. My son Andre used to visit every 2 or 3 months, always in a hurry, always asking to borrow money. He never returned, always with that look of a son who knows his mother will never tell him no, no matter how many times he disappoints her. But never, not once in 6 years, had he shown up like this with suitcases and a wife and an announcement instead of a request. When they came inside, Simone didn't even greet me properly like someone entering another person's home should. She just gave a quick hey, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, didn't extend her hand for a handshake, didn't lean in for a hug, nothing that suggested she saw me as Andre's mother or as the owner of the house she was. Entering, she started walking around my living room as if she were a real estate agent, inspecting an unfamiliar property that needed evaluation, running her fingers along my furniture, looking at my decorations with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, but that made my stomach tighten with anxiety. She paused in front of my cream-colored sofa with the floral cushions I'd bought 2 years ago at a furniture store in Germantown. Cushions I absolutely loved because they reminded me of my grandmother's house from when I was a child. Simone wrinkled her nose slightly, a small gesture that spoke volumes about what she thought of my taste, of my choices, of the home I'd created for myself. Andre dropped both heavy suitcases in the middle of my living room floor with a thud that seemed too loud in the quiet space. He gave me a quick automatic hug, the kind people give when they want to appear affectionate but are really thinking about something else entirely, already moving on to the next thing before the embrace is even complete. "Mama, we needed a change," he said, pulling away from me and glancing toward my kitchen as if he were already cataloging what was in my refrigerator, what resources were available to him here. "Things weren't working out at our apartment in Midtown, and we thought it would be good to stay here with you for a while, just temporarily, until we figure some things out." Simone nodded without looking at me, her eyes still scanning my living room, my walls, my furniture, everything I'd chosen so carefully. "Just for a while," she repeated, but the tone of her voice didn't sound temporary at all. It sounded final, settled, as if decisions had already been made without my input. I didn't ask them what had happened at their apartment. I didn't ask why they hadn't called first, to ask if this arrangement would work for me. I didn't tell them that I would have preferred a warning, even just 1 day's notice, to prepare myself mentally and emotionally to think about whether this was something I even wanted in my carefully constructed peaceful life. I just nodded the way I always had. For 67 years, the automatic agreement that came from decades of conditioning to put everyone else's needs first, and I told them they could stay in the second bedroom that I'd been using for storage and as a sewing room. Andre smiled with visible relief, his whole body relaxing as if he'd been worried I might actually say no for once in my life. Simone finally took off her dark sunglasses and looked directly at me for the first time since arriving. "Thanks, Pamela," she said, using my first name. Not Mama, not Mrs. Griffin, not even Miss Pamela, the way younger people in the South typically address their elders as a sign of respect. Just my first name, as if we were co-workers or casual acquaintances instead of family. "We're going to need some closet space," she added, already making demands, already taking control, and then she turned away to continue her inspection of my home. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my own house that now felt different, invaded, no longer entirely mine. I could hear Andre and Simone's voices through the thin wall that separated my bedroom from theirs, talking in low tones that I couldn't quite make out, laughing occasionally about something I wasn't part of. At some point around midnight, I heard Simone mention something about changing the furniture, her voice slightly louder, and Andre responded that yes, there were a lot of old things in this house that were pretty useless now, things that could be updated or replaced. They didn't say my name specifically, but I felt like they were talking about me too, as if I were part of the inventory of outdated items that needed to be replaced or discarded, something from another era that no longer had value in the modern world. I got up quietly, went to my kitchen, poured myself a glass of water from the pitcher I kept in the refrigerator, and stood there in the darkness, feeling something I hadn't felt in my own house since the day I bought it 6 years ago. I felt like an intruder in my own space. I felt uncomfortable in the home I'd chosen and paid for. I felt small and invisible and powerless. The next morning I woke up early as usual at 6:00 a.m. I showered, dressed carefully in a pair of jeans and a pink blouse I particularly liked, combed my chestnut brown hair that I'd had colored just last week, and quietly left the house for my morning walk. Joyce was already waiting for me at our usual meeting spot at Shelby Farms Park with her coffee thermos and that huge warm smile she always has that makes everyone around her feel welcomed and valued. "Pamela, it's a miracle you got here on time," she said, hugging me tightly. "Usually I'm the one standing here waiting for you to show up." I told her everything as we walked our usual route past the lake. I told her that Andre had shown up yesterday completely unannounced, that he'd brought Simone with him, that they had simply declared they were moving in, as if my opinion didn't matter, and that they had settled into my house as if it belonged to them instead of to me. Joyce stopped walking abruptly and looked at me with a serious expression I didn't see on her face very often. "And what did you say when he told you this?" she asked directly. "Nothing," I replied, hearing how pathetic the word sounded when I said it out loud. "I didn't say anything at all. I just let them in and told them they could stay in the spare bedroom." Joyce shook her head slowly, disappointment clear in her eyes, though I knew it wasn't directed at me personally, but at the situation, at the pattern I'd been trapped in my whole life. "Pam, that house is yours. You paid for it with your own money. You decide who lives there and who doesn't. You have the right to say no." "I know that," I said quietly, looking down at the path beneath our feet, unable to meet her eyes because the truth made me feel ashamed. But I couldn't tell my own son no. He's my child. What kind of mother turns away her child when he needs help? Joyce sighed deeply, that patient sigh she used when she was about to tell me something important that I needed to hear, even if I didn't want to. "Honey, sometimes the problem isn't that we can't say no to our children. The problem is that no one ever taught us we had the right to say no in the first place. We were raised to believe that being a good mother means sacrificing everything, even our own peace and dignity, and that's just not true." Her words stayed with me for the rest of our walk, circling in my mind like birds I couldn't chase away. I got back home 2 hours later, feeling somewhat fortified by Joyce's support and by the morning exercise that always cleared my head. But when I opened my front door, the sight that greeted me froze me completely in my tracks, my hand still on the doorknob, my body unable to move forward into my own house. Simone had moved my furniture. My cream-colored sofa, that I loved, the one I'd saved up for and chosen so carefully, was pushed against a completely different wall, disrupting the entire flow of the room I'd arranged so thoughtfully. My floral cushions that reminded me of my grandmother were piled carelessly in a corner like trash waiting to be thrown out. The coffee table where I always put my morning tea and my magazines and my reading glasses was sitting out on the back patio as if it had been exiled from the house. Andre was up on a small ladder hanging a huge modern painting on my main wall, an abstract piece with harsh gray and black lines that I absolutely hated, art that felt cold and impersonal and completely wrong for this space. Simone was standing in the middle of my living room with her hands on her hips, directing everything like she was some kind of interior designer brought in to fix a disaster. "Oh, Pamela, you're back," she said when she finally noticed me standing in my own doorway. "We're making a few small changes, just little updates to make the space feel fresher, more current, more modern. Hope you don't mind." She said it as a statement, not really a question, not really asking for my permission or my opinion, just informing me of what had already been decided without me. I looked at my cushions tossed carelessly in the corner. I looked at my sofa displaced from where I'd positioned it. I looked at that horrible, ugly painting Andre was hanging on the wall where I'd had a framed photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day, a photo I looked at every morning and every evening. Something inside me wanted to scream, wanted to shout that this was my house, and no one, absolutely no one, had the right to move a single item without asking me first, without getting my explicit permission, without showing me the basic respect of consulting me about changes to my own home. But decades of conditioning are hard to break in a single moment. I just smiled, that automatic smile I'd perfected over 67 years of putting everyone else first, and I said in a voice that sounded calm, even though I was screaming inside, "It's fine. Do whatever you need to do." Simone smiled with satisfaction, clearly pleased that I hadn't objected, hadn't set any boundaries, hadn't claimed my own space. She went back to giving Andre instructions about where to hang the painting, how to arrange the furniture, what else needed to be changed to suit her vision of what my house should look like. The days that followed started to blur together into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My house stopped feeling like my house. Every morning I woke up with a sense of dread, expecting to find something else changed, something else moved, something else that no longer belonged to me, some other piece of my carefully constructed life dismantled without my consent. Simone had taken over my kitchen completely and systematically. She moved my plates and bowls to cabinets that were too high for me to reach comfortably without a step stool, forcing me to ask for help or struggle every time I wanted to eat a meal in my own home. She reorganized all my spices and cooking supplies according to some system that made sense to her, but was completely illogical to me, so I could no longer find anything I needed. She put her own expensive pots and pans, gleaming stainless steel that probably cost more than my monthly pension check, exactly where I'd kept my old reliable cookware that I'd used for 30 years. And every single time I tried to cook something, tried to prepare a meal in the kitchen I'd designed and organized to suit my needs, she would appear as if summoned by some alarm I couldn't hear. She'd materialize in the doorway with that particular half-smile of hers and say in a tone that sounded considerate on the surface, but had something cold underneath, "Pamela, why don't you let me handle this? You've done enough cooking for a lifetime, haven't you? Just relax. Take a rest. You've earned it." It sounded thoughtful and caring when the words came out of her mouth, but the tone wasn't considerate at all. It was dismissive. It was as if she were telling me I was useless now that my time being useful in this kitchen or anywhere else was over, that I should just sit down and be quiet and let the younger generation take over. Andre wasn't helping the situation at all. In fact, he was making it worse by his complete passivity. He spent most of each day sprawled on my sofa looking at his phone, scrolling endlessly through social media or playing games, accomplishing nothing productive. Sometimes he'd leave the house without explanation and come back late in the evening without telling me where he'd been. When I finally gathered the courage to ask him if he was looking for work, if he was applying for jobs, if he had any plan for supporting himself and his wife, he'd just wave his hand dismissively and say, "Mama, I'm working on it. I've got some things in the pipeline. Don't worry about me." But I was worried. I was very worried because I could see exactly where this was heading, and I felt powerless to stop it. 2 weeks after they moved in, I came home from my painting class at the community center, a class I'd started attending 3 months ago and had grown to love because it gave me a space that was entirely mine, a creative outlet where I could express myself without judgment. When I walked through my front door that afternoon, I found Simone sitting at my small dining table with papers spread out in front of her, official-looking documents with dense text that I couldn't read from where I stood. She was on her phone talking in a low voice to someone, and when she saw me, she quickly gathered the papers and smiled. "Just taking care of some paperwork," she said casually, sliding the documents into a folder. Nothing important. But something about the way she'd reacted when I came in, the speed with which she'd hidden those papers, made my stomach clench with anxiety. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something beyond the obvious intrusion into my space and my life. I waited until I heard Andre and Simone's bedroom door close, waited another hour to be sure they were asleep, and then I quietly went to the living room where I'd seen Simone leave her bag. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I'd never snooped through anyone's belongings in my entire life. I'd been raised to believe that respecting other people's privacy was fundamental to being a good person. But this was my house, and these were people who had taken over my space without permission, and some instinct I couldn't ignore was screaming at me that I needed to know what was on those papers. Inside her bag, I found a folder. Inside that folder, I found documents that made my blood run cold. There were printed emails between Simone and someone named Jessica Thornton, who appeared to be a lawyer based on the signature. The emails discussed strategies for having me declared mentally incompetent. They talked about documenting my behavior, about gathering evidence that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs, about the process for obtaining legal guardianship over me and therefore control over my assets, including my house. There was a draft of a petition to the court claiming that I showed signs of dementia, that I was a danger to myself, that I needed someone to make decisions for me. The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, so coldly calculated that I felt physically sick reading them. There were also printed listings of my house's estimated value from real estate websites. Simone had been researching how much my home was worth, what it would sell for in the current Memphis market. The number I saw made my head spin. In just 6 years since I'd bought this house, the neighborhood had appreciated significantly. My little 2-bedroom home was now worth nearly $285,000, according to these estimates. That was the real reason they were here. Not because Andre needed his mother's support, not because they were going through a hard time. They wanted my house. I sat there on my living room floor in the dark, holding those papers in my trembling hands, feeling like my entire world had shattered. This was my son, the baby boy I'd carried for 9 months. The child I'd nursed and raised and sacrificed for. The young man I'd supported through every failure and every bad decision. And he was plotting with his wife to have me declared incompetent so they could take everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, the one thing in my life that was truly mine. I barely slept that night. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every interaction I'd had with Andre and Simone since they arrived, seeing everything in a new, horrible light. Every time Simone had dismissed my opinions, every time she'd talked to me like I was a child who couldn't understand simple things, every time she'd taken over my kitchen or moved my furniture, she'd been building a case. She'd been creating a narrative of a confused old woman who couldn't manage her own life, who needed someone younger and more capable to step in and take control. The next morning, I called Joyce before my usual walk time. My hands were still shaking as I dialed her number. "I need you to come over," I said when she answered. "Right now, please. Something terrible has happened." Joyce arrived 20 minutes later. I showed her the documents I'd found, explained everything I'd read, told her about the emails and the real estate listings, and the plan to have me declared incompetent. Joyce's face went through a series of emotions as she read shock and anger and something that looked like fierce protective rage on my behalf. "Pamela," she said, finally, her voice shaking with emotion, "you need to call the police right now. This is elder abuse. This is fraud. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. These are serious crimes." "He's my son," I whispered, tears finally starting to fall after holding them back all night. "I can't send my own child to jail." "What kind of mother does that?" Joyce grabbed both my hands and looked directly into my eyes with an intensity I'd never seen from her before. "A mother who values herself. A mother who refuses to be victimized by her own child. A mother who understands that love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. That's what kind of mother does that. And you need to do it today, right now, before they have a chance to file any of these papers." I sat there paralyzed by conflicting emotions, decades of conditioning, telling me that family comes first, that mothers protect their children no matter what, that I should find a way to forgive this, to understand this, to excuse this. Somehow. But Joyce wasn't finished. "Listen to me carefully, Pam. If you don't act now, if you let this go, they will succeed. They will have you declared incompetent. You will lose your house. You will lose your independence. You will lose everything you've worked for, your entire life. And they will put you in a nursing home somewhere while they sell your house and spend your money. Is that what you want?" "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper but growing stronger. "No, that's not what I want." "Then you know what you have to do," Joyce said firmly. "You need to protect yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. Not Andre, not Simone, not anyone, just you. You are the only one who can save yourself from this." I called the police at 1030 that morning. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone, but Joyce stood beside me the entire time, her presence giving me strength I didn't know I still had. When the dispatcher answered, I explained the situation as clearly as I could, my voice wavering but determined. I told them about the documents I'd found, about the plan to have me declared incompetent, about how my son and his wife had moved into my house without real permission and were now attempting to take control of my property and my crate included life. The dispatcher took down all the information and told me officers would be there within 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Joyce made me tea that I couldn't drink because my stomach was too twisted with anxiety and guilt and fear. Andre and Simone were still asleep in my spare bedroom, completely unaware that their entire scheme was about to collapse around them. When the doorbell rang at exactly 11:05, I jumped at the sound, even though I'd been expecting it. 2 Memphis police officers stood on my porch, a man and a woman, both looking professional and serious. I let them in and showed them the documents I'd found. I explained the whole situation from the beginning, how Andre and Simone had shown up unannounced, how they'd taken over my house, how I'd discovered their plan to have me declared incompetent so they could gain control of my property. The female officer, whose name tag read Patterson, looked at the papers carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Ma'am, do you want these individuals removed from your property?" Officer Patterson asked me directly. It was such a simple question, but answering it felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done in my 67 years of life. Saying yes meant choosing myself over my son. It meant setting a boundary I'd never set before. It meant accepting that the little boy I'd raised had grown into a man who was willing to betray me in the cruelest possible way. "Yes," I said, and the word came out stronger than I expected. "Yes, I want them to leave. This is my house, and they don't have my permission to be here anymore." The officers asked me to wait in the kitchen with Joyce while they went to wake Andre and Simone. I heard voices, first confused, then angry, then defensive. I heard Simone's voice rising, saying something about how I was confused, how I didn't understand what I was doing, how they were just trying to help me. I heard Andre saying, "That's my mother, you can't do this, she's not thinking clearly." But Officer Patterson's voice cut through their protests with calm authority. "Sir, this is her property, and she's asking you to leave. You need to gather your belongings and vacate the premises immediately." What followed was 45 minutes of chaos. Andre came into the kitchen where I sat with Joyce, his face red with anger and something that might have been shame if he were capable of feeling it. "Mama, what are you doing?" he demanded. "We're your family. You're really going to throw us out on the street?" I looked at my son, this man who had planned to steal everything from me, and I felt something break inside me that had been holding me hostage my entire life. The guilt, the obligation, the desperate need to be seen as a good mother no matter the cost to myself. "You were planning to have me declared incompetent," I said quietly, my voice steady now. "You were going to take my house. You were going to put me in a nursing home. You came here with a plan to destroy my life so you could profit from it. And you're asking me what I'm doing." Andre's face went pale. He looked at Simone, who was standing in the doorway with the female officer, and something passed between them, some silent communication that told me everything I needed to know. This had been their plan all along. Every move calculated, every word designed to make me feel incompetent and confused. "That's not what it was," Andre tried, his voice desperate now. "You don't understand, Mama. We were just trying to protect you. You're getting older, and we thought maybe you needed help managing things." "Don't lie to me anymore," I said, and I was surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I found the emails. I found the documents. I know exactly what you were planning. Now get your things and leave my house." Simone tried a different approach, her voice suddenly soft and concerned. "Pamela, you're clearly upset and not thinking straight. Why don't we all just calm down and talk about this rationally? I think you're confused about what you saw." But Officer Patterson stepped in immediately. "Ma'am, the homeowner has made her wishes clear. You need to collect your belongings now, or we'll have to escort you out without them." It took them another 30 minutes to pack their suitcases. I stayed in the kitchen the entire time, unable to watch, unable to face what was happening, but knowing it had to happen. Joyce held my hand across the table, not saying anything, just being present, being the friend I desperately needed in that moment. When they finally left, when I heard the front door close and the officers' footsteps on my porch telling them they needed to leave the property immediately, I felt my legs give out. I would have fallen if Joyce hadn't been there to catch me. I sobbed into her shoulder, great heaving cries that came from somewhere deep in my soul, mourning not just the relationship with my son, but the illusion I'd held onto for so many years that he would eventually become the person I'd hoped he'd be. After the officers left and confirmed that Andre and Simone had driven away, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. The furniture they'd moved, the spaces they'd invaded, the plans they'd made to take everything from me. I called a locksmith immediately and had every lock in my house changed within 3 hours. New keys, new deadbolts, new security for my sanctuary. That evening, after Joyce finally went home promising to check on me first thing in the morning, I sat alone in my living room and made the hardest decision of my life. I blocked Andre's phone number. Then I blocked Simone's number. Then I sat there staring at my phone, my finger hovering over my contacts list, knowing what I needed to do next, but struggling to find the courage. I needed to tell my other son Michael what had happened. Michael lived in Nashville with his wife Paige and their 2 children. He was 38 years old, a high school teacher, a good man who visited me regularly and actually called just to check on me without needing anything. He and Andre had never been close, their personalities too different, their values too opposite, but he was still Andre's brother, and I owed him the truth about what had happened. I called him that night. When he answered, I could hear his kids laughing in the background, normal family sounds that made my heart ache for what I'd lost with Andre. "Hey Mama," Michael said warmly. "Everything okay? You don't usually call this late." I told him everything. The whole story, from beginning to end, from Andre showing up unannounced to the documents I'd found, to calling the police to having them removed from my house. Michael was silent for a long moment after I finished. Then he said quietly, "Mama, I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but I'm proud of you for protecting yourself. I know that couldn't have been easy." "You're not angry with me?" I asked, surprised by his response. "For calling the police on your brother, angry with you," Michael repeated, his voice incredulous. "Mama, I'm angry at Andre for putting you in that position. What he did, what they planned to do, that's unforgivable. You did exactly what you should have done. You protected yourself because no one else was going to do it." His support meant more to me than he could possibly know. We talked for another hour and he made me promise to call him immediately if Andre or Simone tried to contact me or showed up at my house again. He even offered to drive down from Nashville that weekend to make sure I was okay, an offer I declined because I needed to prove to myself that I could handle this alone, but an offer that touched me deeply nonetheless. The days that followed were strange and disorienting. My house was mine again. I moved all my furniture back to where I wanted it. I took down that horrible gray and black painting and rehung the photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day. I reorganized my kitchen exactly the way I liked it, putting my plates back in the cabinets I could reach, arranging my spices in the order that made sense to me. I threw out every single thing Andre and Simone had left behind, every reminder of their presence in my home. But even though my space was restored, I felt strange in it. I jumped at every sound, worried they might come back. I checked the locks on my doors 5 times before going to bed each night. I had nightmares about waking up to find them standing in my living room again, saying they'd found a way to take my house after all. Joyce came over every day for the first week, sometimes just to sit with me, sometimes to help me clean or rearrange, or simply to remind me that I wasn't alone. My walking group at Shelby Farms rallied around me too. I'd told them a simplified version of what happened, and they surrounded me with support and love and fierce protection. These women, most of them in their 60s and 70s, most of them with their own stories of being taken advantage of by family members, understood in a way that younger people might not have. 3 weeks after Andre left, he started calling Michael. Not me, because I'd blocked his number, but his brother trying to get through to me indirectly. Michael called to tell me about it. "He's saying he needs money, Mama. He says Simone is pregnant, and they have nowhere to go and no money for a place to live. He asked me to talk to you about reconsidering, about maybe letting them come back, or at least helping them financially." "What did you tell him?" I asked, my heart pounding with anxiety that Michael might try to convince me to help them. "I told him I wasn't getting involved in whatever was between him and you," Michael said firmly. "I told him he made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. I told him if he needed money, he needed to get a job like every other adult. And Mama, I want you to know whatever decision you make about this, I support you. If you never want to see Andre again, I understand. If you decide eventually to forgive him, I understand that too. But don't let guilt make you do something that puts you in danger again. The news that Simone was pregnant hit me harder than I expected. Somewhere in my heart, despite everything that had happened there, was still a grandmother's instinct, a desire to know my grandchild, to be part of that baby's life. But I remembered what Joyce had told me, what Officer Patterson had implied, what my own common sense screamed at me. If I opened that door, even a crack, if I let sympathy for an innocent baby override my need for self-protection, Andre and Simone would use that child as a weapon against me. They would manipulate my love for my grandchild to get back into my house, back into my life, back into position to take everything from me. I told Michael to tell Andre that I wished them well, that I hoped they would figure out their situation, but that I couldn't help them. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever said, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. As the weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. I started to heal. Not quickly, not easily, but gradually, like a wound that slowly closes over time. I threw myself into my painting class, discovering a real talent for watercolor landscapes. I started attending a book club at the local library that met every other Tuesday evening. I took a weekend trip with Joyce to Nashville, where we visited museums and ate at restaurants, and stayed in a hotel like we were carefree women on vacation instead of retired ladies from Memphis. I was learning slowly and painfully how to live for myself without the constant weight of family obligation crushing me. I was learning that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. 8 months after I'd had Andre and Simone removed from my house on a Saturday morning, when I was getting ready to go to the hair salon for my bi-weekly appointment, my doorbell rang. I approached the door cautiously, looking through the peephole first, a habit I'd developed since everything that had happened. Standing on my porch was a young woman I didn't recognize, maybe in her late 20s, wearing jeans and a Memphis Tigers sweatshirt. She was holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, and my heart immediately started racing with a mixture of hope and dread. I opened the door but left the security chain attached, creating just a small gap. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice more cautious than I would have liked. "Mrs. Griffin," the young woman asked nervously. "I'm Monica Simone's cousin. She asked me to come and talk to you, if you were willing." I felt my entire body tense. "Is Simone okay?" The baby Monica nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, they're both fine. The baby was born about a month ago. He's healthy. His name is Isaiah." My breath caught in my throat. Isaiah. They'd named him after Robert, after my late husband, after the grandfather he would never meet. Whether it was a genuine tribute or a calculated manipulation, I couldn't tell. "Simone wanted you to meet him." Monica continued, adjusting the baby in her arms so I could see his small face peeking out from the blanket. "She was afraid to come herself. She thought you might not open the door if you saw her. But she really wants you to know your grandson, Mrs. Griffin. She says she understands if you're still angry, but the baby is innocent in all of this." I looked at the child in her arms. He was beautiful, small and perfect, with Robert's nose and what looked like it might be my eyes. I felt something break open in my chest, a grandmother's love mixed with fear and anger and profound sadness. But I also remembered the documents, the emails, the plan to steal my house and have me declared incompetent. I remembered Simone's cold calculation, Andre's betrayal, the way they'd invaded my home and my life without remorse. "I appreciate you coming," I said to Monica, my voice gentle, because this young woman had done nothing wrong and was probably just trying to help her cousin. "But I can't see the baby if it means opening a door I need to keep closed. Please tell Simone I wish her and Andre the best, that I hope they're taking good care of Isaiah, but I'm not ready to have contact with them. Maybe someday, but not today." Monica's face showed understanding mixed with disappointment. "Simone said you'd probably say something like that. She just wanted to try. She gave me her new phone number in case you ever change your mind." She handed me a small piece of paper through the gap in the door. "The baby is beautiful, Mrs. Griffin. He has your smile." I closed the door gently and stood behind it, my hands trembling so violently I had to lean against the wall for support. There was a grandchild. There was a baby with my blood, with Robert's name, that I had just refused to meet. The guilt tried to drown me in that moment. It tried to tell me I was a horrible grandmother, a heartless woman, someone who was punishing an innocent child for his parents' sins. I called Joyce immediately, my voice breaking as I explained what had just happened. She was at my house within 20 minutes, finding me sitting on my living room floor, crying into my hands. "Honey," Joyce said, sitting down beside me and pulling me into a hug. "I know this hurts. I know that refusing to meet your grandson goes against everything you were taught about what a grandmother should be. But you didn't reject the baby. You rejected the abuse. Those are two completely different things. What if I'm wrong?" I asked through my tears. "What if I'm being too hard, too unforgiving? What if years from now I regret this moment?" Joyce took my face in her hands and looked directly into my eyes. "Listen to me, Pam. If Andre and Simone truly wanted you to meet your grandson with pure intentions, they would come themselves. They would come with genuine apologies, with evidence of real change, with respect for your boundaries. But sending someone else with the baby, that's another form of manipulation. It puts all the guilt on you, without them having to do any of the hard work of actually changing their behavior or making real amends." She was right. Somewhere deep in my heart, I knew she was right. If Andre wanted a relationship with me that included his son, he needed to do the work of rebuilding trust, of showing genuine remorse, of proving through consistent action over time that he had changed. Showing up with a baby after 8 months of silence wasn't accountability. It was emotional manipulation, using an innocent child as a tool. The months continued to pass. 9 months since Andre left. 10 months. 11. My life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I was no longer the woman who opened her door to anyone without question. I was no longer the woman who said yes to everything out of fear of being seen as a bad mother, or a bad grandmother, or a bad person. I had learned that saying no was an act of self-love, that protecting myself wasn't cruelty, that my peace and my dignity mattered just as much as anyone else's. I'd made new friends in my painting class, women like me who were rediscovering themselves after years of being defined only by their relationships to other people. One of those women, Luella Metz, became particularly close to me. She had a story remarkably similar to mine. Her daughter had tried to have her institutionalized, to take control of her house, had falsified documents claiming Luella had dementia, had come very close to succeeding. But Luella had fought back, had hired lawyers, had regained control of her life and her assets. She hadn't spoken to her daughter in 5 years, and said she didn't regret it for a single day. "I learned that a mother's love doesn't mean letting your children destroy you," Luella told me one afternoon while we painted side by side. "It means loving yourself enough to refuse abuse, even when that abuse comes from your own children. Especially when it comes from your own children, because they know exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to manipulate your guilt." 1 year and 2 weeks after, I'd called the police and had Andre removed from my house on a Sunday afternoon while I was on my back patio painting a landscape of the Mississippi River I'd photographed during a day trip with Joyce. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize with a Memphis area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mama." It was Andre. His voice sounded different, softer, somehow tired in a way that suggested he'd been through something difficult. I didn't say anything. I just waited, my paintbrush frozen in mid-air, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Mama, I know I don't have any right to call you," Andre continued when I didn't respond. "I know I messed up everything. I know what I did was unforgivable. I just wanted to tell you that you were right about everything. Simone and I separated 3 months ago. She left with Isaiah to live with her mother in Jackson. I'm living alone in a small apartment in Fraser, working at a gas station on the night shift, trying to rebuild my life from nothing." I still didn't speak. I just listened, letting him fill the silence with words I'd waited a year to hear but wasn't sure I believed yet. "Every day I think about what I did to you," Andre said, his voice breaking slightly. "How I treated you. How I came into your house without asking. How I let Simone take over your space. How I went along with that plan to have you declared incompetent so we could take your house. I'm ashamed, Mama. I'm so deeply ashamed I can barely look at myself in the mirror. I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me," he continued. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not calling to ask you for money or help or anything else. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I wanted you to understand that I finally see what I did, how wrong it was, how I betrayed you in the worst possible way. And even though it hurt like hell when you called the police, even though I was angry at the time, I realize now that I needed that. I needed to face the consequences of my actions. I needed to hit rock bottom to understand what I'd become. "Thank you, Mama," Andre said, and now he was clearly crying. "Thank you for not letting me walk all over you. Thank you for protecting yourself. Thank you for loving yourself enough to set boundaries even when it meant losing me. You taught me the hardest lesson I've ever learned, but it was the lesson I needed most." And then he hung up. Just like that. No request to see me, no plea for reconciliation, no manipulation, just an apology and a thank you, and then silence. I sat there on my patio with the phone in my hand for a very long time. The afternoon sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been perfect for a painting if I'd had the focus to capture them. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel the satisfaction of finally being proven right. I didn't feel vindicated or validated in the way I'd imagined I might if Andre ever truly understood what he'd done. I just felt a profound calm, a certainty that I had done the right thing even when it was the hardest thing, even when everyone who didn't know the full story had judged me, even when it had hurt so much I thought the pain might actually kill me. I called Michael that evening and told him about Andre's call. "How do you feel about it?" Michael asked carefully. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "Part of me wants to believe he's really changed. Part of me thinks this might just be another manipulation, another way to get back into my life so he can try again. I don't know which part to trust." "You don't have to decide anything right now," Michael said wisely. "You don't have to forgive him immediately just because he apologized. You don't have to let him back into your life just because he says he's changed. Real change takes time to prove. Real change shows up in consistent actions over months and years, not in one phone call." "You're right," I said, feeling grateful once again for having at least one son who understood healthy boundaries and genuine respect. "I'm going to wait. I'm going to see if this change is real or if it's just words." 2 months after that phone call, Andre sent me a letter. Not a text, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter that arrived in my mailbox in a plain envelope. I stared at it for 3 days before I had the courage to open it. Inside, on lined notebook paper and handwriting I recognized from when he was a child, Andre had written a detailed apology. He acknowledged specifically everything he'd done wrong, moving in without asking, taking over my house, going along with Simone's plan to have me declared incompetent. He explained that he'd been in therapy for the past 4 months, working through issues he'd avoided his whole life, learning about codependency and entitlement, and the damage that manipulation causes. He told me about his job at the gas station, how humbling it was to work night shifts for minimum wage after thinking he was too good for that kind of work. He described the small apartment he lived in, how different it was from my comfortable house, how he finally understood what it meant to work for something instead of taking it from someone else. He wrote about Isaiah, about how much he missed his son, about how Simone had full custody and was allowing him only supervised visits once a month. He said he was paying child support even though it left him with almost nothing, that he was trying to be the father his son deserved, even though he'd failed to be the son his mother deserved. At the end of the letter he wrote, "I'm not asking for anything, Mama. Not forgiveness, not money, not a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on becoming someone different, someone better, someone who would never do to another person what I did to you. Whether you ever want to see me again is entirely your choice. I'll respect whatever you decide. I love you. I'm sorry, Andre." I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer in my bedroom. I didn't respond to it immediately. I let weeks pass, then months, letting his words settle in my mind, watching to see if any other contact came that might suggest manipulation or hidden motives. But nothing came. No phone calls asking for money, no surprise visits, no attempts to use Isaiah as leverage, just silence and space and what seemed like genuine respect for my boundaries. 16 months after I'd had Andre removed from my house, I woke up on my 68th birthday to the sound of birds singing outside my bedroom window and sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd chosen myself. For the first time in years, decades really, I woke up feeling genuinely happy. Not just content, not just okay, but truly deeply happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My life had become beautifully simple and entirely my own. I spent my mornings tending to the flowers on my back patio, watching them grow and bloom under my care. I walked with Joyce and my group at Shelby Farms Park, talking and laughing about everything and nothing. I attended my painting class twice a week, where I'd discovered a real talent for watercolor landscapes that surprised even me. I'd sold 3 paintings at a local art fair, small amounts of money that meant less for the dollars and more for the validation that I could create something valuable, something people wanted. My relationship with Michael and Paige had deepened. They visited more often now, bringing their children, who called me Grandma, and actually seemed to enjoy spending time with me. I'd become a real presence in their lives, not just someone who gave them money or solved their problems, but someone they genuinely wanted to be around. On the afternoon of my birthday, Joyce organized a small celebration at my house. She invited my walking group, my painting class friends, Luella, and several other women I'd grown close to over this transformative year. We ate cake. I'd baked myself in my own kitchen that no one had taken over, and we laughed until our sides hurt, and I felt surrounded by genuine love and friendship in a way that had nothing to do with obligation or guilt. As I was cleaning up after everyone had left, I found myself thinking about Andre's letter still tucked away in my bedroom drawer. I thought about his phone call, his apology, his claim that he'd changed. I thought about Isaiah, my grandson, who I'd never met, who was now 13 months old, and walking and saying his first words without me there to witness any of it. And I felt a small, careful opening in my heart. Not forgiveness, exactly not yet, but maybe the possibility of it somewhere far in the future if Andre continued to prove through consistent actions over time that his change was real and lasting. That evening, I did something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I wrote Andre a letter. Not a long one, not an emotional one, just a simple acknowledgement that I'd received his letter and his phone call, that I appreciated his apology, that I hoped he was continuing to work on himself and be a good father to Isaiah. I told him I wasn't ready for a relationship yet, that I needed more time, that trust broken as deeply as he'd broken it couldn't be repaired with words alone, but only with years of consistent changed behavior. But I also told him that I was open to the possibility of eventually rebuilding some kind of connection if he continued on the path he claimed to be on. I mailed the letter the next day, and then I let it go, released it into the universe, without expectation or demand, simply as an acknowledgement of the truth as I understood it in that moment. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning when Memphis was experiencing one of those perfect spring days that make you remember why you love the South, Andre asked through Michael if he could visit me. Not at my house, he specified. He understood that my home was my sanctuary and he'd violated it too deeply to be welcomed back so easily. But maybe at a coffee shop or a park, somewhere neutral, somewhere public, somewhere I could leave if I needed to. I agreed to meet him at a small cafe near the Memphis Botanic Garden, a place I'd been many times with Joyce, a place where I felt safe and comfortable. When I arrived, Andre was already there, sitting at an outdoor table, looking thinner than I remembered, older somehow, despite only a year having passed. He stood when he saw me, uncertain whether to hug me or shake my hand or simply nod. I made the decision for him, giving him a brief, careful hug that acknowledged our relationship without pretending everything was fine. We talked for 2 hours over coffee that grew cold as we spoke. Andre told me about his therapy, about the things he was learning about himself, about patterns he'd developed since childhood of expecting others to solve his problems. He told me about his job, how he'd been promoted to assistant manager at the gas station, how proud he was of earning that promotion through actual work rather than manipulation or family connections. He showed me pictures of Isaiah on his phone, a beautiful toddler with Robert's eyes and my smile, and I felt my heart ache with love for a child I'd never held. He told me about his relationship with Simone, how they were divorced now, how he saw Isaiah twice a month for supervised visits, how he was faithfully paying child support even though it left him struggling financially. "I'm not asking to move back in," Andre said clearly, looking directly at me. "I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything except maybe someday, if I prove myself over time, the chance to have some kind of relationship with you again, even if it's small, even if it's just coffee every few months. I miss you, Mama. Not your house, not your money, you." I looked at my son across the table and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, real understanding of what he'd done, authentic shame about the person he'd been. But I also knew that one conversation, one apology, one seemingly sincere moment wasn't enough to rebuild what he'd destroyed. "I appreciate you telling me all this," I said carefully. "I can see you're working on yourself and I'm glad. But I need you to understand that rebuilding trust doesn't happen quickly. It happens over years of consistent behavior, of respecting boundaries, of proving through actions rather than words that you've really changed. I'm willing to have coffee with you occasionally if you want, but it needs to be on my terms, at my pace, with my boundaries firmly in place. Andre nodded, tears in his eyes. Whatever you're willing to give, Mama, I'll take it. And I'll keep proving to you that I'm different now, however long it takes. We finished our coffee and parted with another careful hug. I watched him walk away down the street toward his car, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever completely, but a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, something could eventually be rebuilt from the ruins, something different and smaller and healthier than what we'd had before. That evening I stood on my back patio looking at the flowers I'd planted, the garden. I'd created the space that was entirely mine. I thought about the journey I'd taken over the past 16 months, from the woman who couldn't say no to the woman who'd called the police on her own son to protect herself. I thought about Joyce and Luella and all the friends who'd supported me. I thought about Michael, who'd stood by me even when it meant going against his brother. I thought about the paintings I'd created, the mornings walking in the park, the quiet evenings reading in my living room without anyone interrupting or taking over or trying to steal everything I'd worked for. I was Pamela Griffin, 68 years old, finally free. I'd learned that saying no was an act of love, that protecting myself wasn't selfishness but survival, that my peace mattered, that my dignity was worth fighting for. I'd learned that being a good mother didn't mean sacrificing everything, including my own well-being. It meant teaching my children through example that everyone, even elderly mothers, deserves respect and boundaries and basic human dignity. I'd lost a son for a time, maybe forever in the way we'd been before, but I'd gained myself, and that trade, as painful as it had been, was worth it. That is Pamela Griffin's story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city, what country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these powerful stories about mothers who finally chose themselves, about adult children who learned that love doesn't mean unlimited access, and about the moment when setting boundaries becomes necessary for survival. Real question: if you were Pamela and your son showed up at your door saying, "I decided to move back in without asking first," what would you have done in that moment? Would you have let them in like she did? Would you have said no right at the door, or would you have handled it differently? Tell me in the comments, because I genuinely want to know how you would respond to that level of entitlement from your own child. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you deeply. Share it if you know someone who's being taken advantage of by their adult children, someone whose house has been invaded by family members who won't leave, someone whose kindness is being exploited by people who should be protecting them. Someone who needs to hear that it's okay to call the police on your own child if they're trying to steal your home and your independence. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about mothers who refuse to be victims in their own homes, adult children who learned that consequences are real, families who crossed lines that should never be crossed, and what happens when an animated elderly parent finally says enough and means it with action. This story is about more than just one woman calling the police on her son. It's about recognizing when helping becomes enabling. It's about understanding that elder abuse often comes from family members you love and trust. It's about knowing that your home is your sanctuary, and no one, not even your own children, has the right to take it from you through manipulation or fraud. Thanks for watching. Remember, you are not obligated to let adult children move into your home without permission. Your house is not a free hotel for family members who refuse to support themselves. Being a good mother doesn't mean allowing your children to plot taking everything you've worked for, and protecting yourself from financial exploitation is not selfishness, it's self-preservation. See you in the next video.